My name is Paul Grandal. I'm the director of the New York State Writers Institute at the University at Albany. We come to this moment in response to the insurrection and deadly attacks on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021. We face ongoing threats to our democracy in a variety of forms. The State of the Union feels to many to be at its most fragile point in generations. Today we confront a large and entrenched group of election deniers, as well as ongoing threats to democracy and free speech and attacks on truth itself. The threats are relentless, come from many fronts, from highly sophisticated propaganda and disinformation mechanisms to vast network of conspiracy theorists. The list of things that frighten any engaged citizen goes on and on. That's why we brought these journalists, authors, watchdogs, and truth tellers together tonight. We want to have a conversation with the experts who have their fingers on the pulse of the people, the politicians, the press, and everything that goes into vox populi. That quaint notion of a majority even exists anymore, or if it ever did. We don't expect to give you all the answers tonight, but we will ask important questions as we engage in this meaningful conversation. Our goal with this fourth edition, as with previous symposiums, is to promote dialogue, to open channels of communication, to listen to other perspectives, and to engage in a civil conversation. A few simple ground rules for the night. Please treat everyone with courtesy and respect. We value close and careful listening. We seek to generate more light than heat. We strive to find common ground. We hope this is just the beginning of the conversation. There'll be time at the end of each of our two sessions tonight for audience Q&A. You'll be directed to step up to one of the two microphones that you see here down near the front of the auditorium. We request that you ask your question briefly and succinctly. This isn't a chance to have a monologue or make a political statement. It's a question and answer session. And I'd also like to remind you that our longtime partner, Albany's independent bookstore, Bookhouse, has copies of our panelist books for sale. There'll be a book signing with the panelists here on stage after the conclusion of the second session. We ask that you line up in an orderly fashion against the wall over there, and we'll come up to the table one at a time. Now let me introduce our panelists for our first session, Truth in Media, which I will moderate. I'll be brief so we can get started, but you can read longer bios of the panelists in this evening's printed program. Nandini Jammi is a leading truth in broadcasting activist and a founder of Check My Ads and Sleeping Giants, which are advertising watchdog organizations committed to making hate and bigotry unprofitable in American media. Please welcome Nandini Jammi. Brian Stelter is the former chief media correspondent for CNN Worldwide and former anchor of Reliable Sources, the weekly examination of the world's top media stories. He's also the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Hoax, Donald Trump, Fox News, and the Dangerous Distortion of Truth. Please welcome Brian Stelter. So I really want to thank you both for coming to UAlbany and the Writers Institute. You've both done really vital, groundbreaking work in this fight for truth and the battle against lies and disinformation. So I thank you. But Brian, I really should have you here. I mean, I'm looking at the master of this role, and I'll do my best to be a moderator with you.
It's more fun for me to answer than ask.
Okay.
I'm taking a break from moderating. That's what I'm doing.
Excellent. So, Nandini, in your work, you've likened efforts at stamping out hate and bigotry as an advertising watchdog to a game of whack-a-mole. You confront one bad actor, then another two or three, possibly worse, pop up. Can you describe the size, scope, and danger of what you call, quote, disinformation economy and this disinformation ecosystem that exists, and why is it so pernicious and difficult to defeat at this time?
Wow, starting me off on a big question. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor to be joining you and talking about my work. So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a $700 billion and growing economy that undergirds everything that we experience today. That is the digital advertising, the digital advertising industry, which we've dubbed as the disinformation economy, because this industry is what props up all the disinformation that you see online. When we think about disinformation, we often talk about it in terms of Facebook and Twitter and social media and where all that stuff spreads and where you first read about it. But that is not the economy. The disinformation economy is what happens when you click on the link of the fake news article that you saw on Facebook and go to the website on the open web. And waiting for you is a website full of ads. And someone is serving those ads. And to be more specific, it's ad exchanges and ad networks and a series of middlemen and intermediaries that you've never heard of that are waiting to monetize your attention and your clicks. And that is that economy, that supply chain is what undergirds the disinformation that we see today. And it is becoming, it's been a problem for years, and the reason that we focus on advertising is because this economy is completely opaque and unaccountable to anyone, including advertisers. So $700 billion, and today advertisers cannot check their ads. They cannot understand where their ads are going, and they're actively discouraged from seeing where their ads go. And so when you think about it, it means that every single one of us who is in marketing or runs a business, whether it's a small business, whether you're running a Google Ads campaign for your, local Italian restaurant down the street, or you're the head of P&G, you do not know where your ads are going or what they're funding.
Thank you. And I do want it to be a dialogue, thank you, Nandini, between you and Brian, but I'll throw a question to Brian. I'm going to read this paragraph from the introduction, the preface to your book, Hoax. I think it sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about tonight. And it goes like this, quote, "Like so many Americans, I'm shocked and angry. So what you'll get in these pages is not the Stelter in a navy blue blazer you see on CNN. I'm writing this book as a citizen, as an advocate for factual journalism, and as a new dad who thinks about what kind of world my children are going to inherit. This story is about a rot at the core of our politics. It is about an ongoing attack on the very idea of a free and fair press. It's about the difference between news and propaganda. It's about the difference between state media and the Fourth Estate. So excuse me if I swear a little bit, but I am alarmed, and you should be too." You wrote that a little over 2 years ago. My question, are you more shocked, angry, and alarmed today? And you can swear if you need to.
I think the alarm bells should be ringing louder and louder each year, yes. Even between writing the hardcover edition of Hoax and the paperback edition of Hoax. What I love about this session tonight is that our frame for both panels is telling the truth. We're here to talk about the truth, about truth in media. But we can't do that without unpacking the disinformation, without unpacking the funding, without unpacking the supply and demand parts of the problem. That yes, there's this supply of nonsense and lies on the internet, but there's also demand for it. And that's what I was so interested in writing about Fox News and Donald Trump, both the demand for those falsehoods as well as the supply. And I hope that's what we can get into tonight as well. We have to, if we're going to talk about how to have truth in media and where we find trusted sources, we also then have to explore the disinformation. And, I want to make a distinction between straight up actual disinformation and then a lot of distractions and distortions and deceptions that happen that might not actually count as a made up piece of information designed to deceive you, which I think of disinformation as something malicious and a lie that's actually there to trick you, to lead you down the wrong road. But so much of what also happens in our poisoned information ecosystem is a distortion or a distraction, an excuse, a look over here, not over there, and that's what we've seen today. Today's going to be remembered as a horrible day in this country. To have the number 3 in line to the presidency, number 2 in line, Nancy Pelosi's husband, to have Nancy Pelosi's husband attacked by an attempted murderer. I don't think it's sunk in yet. I don't know if it's sunk in for all of you. It hasn't sunk in for me yet. We call the second gentleman, the first, the vice president's husband. Well, he was the third gentleman, right? And to be attacked in his home, thank God he was able to call 911 and able to get emergency responders over there. But now we know he was in surgery today. We know that he has a long road to recovery ahead. And of course, we also know, according to the authorities, that this attacker was looking for Nancy Pelosi in much the same way that on January 6th, those bastards were walking through the halls asking, "Where's Nancy?" So we know this is part of something bigger. We know that political violence is on the rise. We know that these kinds of attacks are becoming more and more common, and today's an especially heinous example. So today there's been actual disinformation, right? And certainly there's disinformation about Nancy Pelosi in the same way there is for any politician, Republican or Democrat. There's lies about Nancy Pelosi, but a lot of what's happening today, it's just distraction and deception and distortion. What you hear on Fox this afternoon is that San Francisco's a hellhole, so of course he was going to get attacked in his home, and Biden's failed to unite the country. It's his fault there's so much violence. So that's not disinformation, I would argue. I would argue that's distraction, distortion. It's look over here, not over there. And that's what a lot of those stars on Fox specialize in. That's not unique to Fox, of course. This happens on other channels, it happens on other platforms, it happens all across the internet. And it happens in some extent on the left as well as the right, although the problem on the right is very, very severe right now. So I just wanted to draw the distinction as we talk about how do we get to truth in media, what does it mean to tell the truth? Well, there's lots of ways not to tell the truth. And one of them is what you attack in trying to go after the funding sources. Another is just that daily effort to spin so crazily that you can't see straight anymore. And that's a lot of what I think we see in partisan media. And it was on my mind today in the wake of this attack that it's not about denying there was a violent episode. It's about making you hate the other side more, or making you think it was the other side's fault, or making it impossible to know whose fault it was, or just making you throw up your hands in exhaustion and move on. And I think that is what ultimately contributes to this sense of information pollution that we all are experiencing. I think our lungs are all choked by it, even if we don't always realize it. That was my motivation to write Hoax. It was a lot of my motivation in hosting Reliable Sources for years, trying to unpack some of this. One of my only regrets is not having you on to talk about it. I think we don't talk about the funding sources and the supply and demand and how this stuff makes money, then there's no changing the amount of pollution that's in the atmosphere.
Thank you. This is for both Nandini and Brian. You both have done courageous, fearless work taking on some very dark and powerful forces. Nandini, you went after Breitbart News in a way that a lot of advertisers left and they lost a lot of money. Brian, you take on Fox News head on. I'm wondering, do you feel you made a lasting impact, or like that whack-a-mole, does it just pop up after you do? And secondly, personally, what kind of price did you pay? I assume not just trolls, but they come after you, to counterattack you or to undermine you or to lie about you. So we'll start with Nandini.
So for anyone who doesn't know, in 2016, I co-founded Sleeping Giants as a campaign to alert advertisers that their ads were appearing on Breitbart. For most of them, they had just been running Google ads, and their ads ran all over the internet, and Breitbart was one of them. They just weren't aware, and the campaign alerted them and gave them a chance to confirm that they'd blocked it. And that's what started this, that's what sparked this movement. What I didn't know at the time, because I was not in the advertising industry, I didn't really know how ads worked other than, turning on a Google ad campaign, was that in the background, the way that our campaign was interpreted by the ad industry was, at Sleeping Giants, we were saying it's not appropriate for you to fund bigotry, hate, xenophobia, misogyny. We used very specific words to ask advertisers to reevaluate their media buy, and the way that it was translated or interpreted in the ad industry was, well, I guess we shouldn't advertise on anything that could be deemed as controversial or bad news. And I'll get into the specifics of that, but that was a devastating consequence for the news industry, because the way that the problem was defined within the industry actually had a huge negative impact on journalism and the news, and it happened very quickly, en masse, a mass defunding of the news, and I'm happy to talk about that more and how we're addressing that problem. To answer your other question about the personal impact of this work, yes, there have been times where we are viciously attacked, and it is scary and it sucks, but I've learned over time that when they come in waves, and I'm sure I don't know how it is for you, Brian, but they come in waves for us, and usually it is an indication that we are being successful at what we do. So it sucks, but it's also a success metric.
Thank you, Nandini. Brian, what has been the consequence after Hoax came out, or even before? How did Trump News hit back at you, or Trump News? Yeah, it is kind of Trump News.
Yeah, well, no, it is Trump News. Listen, I'm a child of the internet. I was able, when I was 10 years old, to learn HTML and start coding my first web page and upload it to the internet where anybody in the world who had access to the internet could read it. That's an incredible, incredible gift that my parents didn't have growing up, and my grandparents didn't have growing up. And now, in the future, my children will have that same gift. They'll be able to create content anytime, anywhere. They can reach these huge audiences. They can make an incredible impact in the world in a way that was unimaginable to our ancestors. And as we talk about this, I want to recognize what an incredible gift that is. So when I'm about to describe the harassment and trolling that comes from that same internet, that same place, there was incredible potential, this pipeline of immense potential. It's also a sewer full of horrors. I just don't ever want to throw out the positives there, because I wouldn't have been hired at the New York Times and hired by CNN and able to write books if not for that ability to build web pages in my basement and upload them to the internet for anybody to read. For me, when I was at CNN 2013 to 2022, and it was clear by 2015 that the biggest story on my beat was the war on truth, this tug of war over truth, and Fox plays a central role in that tug of war. Donald Trump played a central role and still does. So it wasn't as if I went out looking for a controversial hot topic, something that's going to get me in trouble. It's the biggest story. When the President of the United States calls you the enemy of the people, you don't, I remember, I'll never forget, the Friday night when he first made that horrible claim, and we were visiting friends in Pennsylvania, and I knew I had a show on Sunday morning, and it's I'm not going to just stay at the cabin and not go into work and not call out his hateful rhetoric and not explain why it's so disgusting. It's not an option. You go into work, you talk about it, you try to talk about it in a way that's not all red face, but instead actually is going to get through to people, and you try to explore the consequences beyond just, the elite media bubbles that me and some of my guests would sometimes be in. So I guess I'm trying to say it was just the job. It was what to do at the time. And so one of the byproducts of that is that, people recognize you in the airport, and that's fun. One of the other byproducts of that is that you get crazy trolls and threats. And I was really grateful to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the SDNY, the Southern District of New York, for prosecuting one of those cases last year. So it was on my mind because I recently was given updates about the man who's now behind bars. And I think back to that case because it was November of 2020, and so it was right after Trump lost. And this man in California was reading lies on the internet, claiming that Trump won. He was watching stuff on Fox, and he was getting really upset that I was telling the truth on TV, which is not something brave. It's just our job, just to tell the facts on TV. And so he started sending me nasty messages, tried to trick my brother into communicating with him, pretended he was in the backyard of my mom's house in the woods, looking into my mom's house. That kind of stuff that, frankly, I was very numb to. Like, I didn't take it that seriously. Like, I went downstairs, I told my doorman that, keep an eye on things, but there's nothing I was going to do. I wasn't going to call the police. I figured it was just another troll. It turned out in the weeks and months after, he then harassed lots of other people, other CNN anchors, politicians, CEOs, and was eventually arrested after January 6th for that harassment and is now behind bars. And so I was grateful for the government for prosecuting that case, not because I felt any particular trauma from it, but because there has to be a message sent that harassment of journalists and public officials and lawmakers cannot be acceptable. That we have to hold the line in that way to make clear that we can't get numb to it. Like, people like me can't get numb to that stuff. And by the way, the Sean Hannitys and Tucker Carlsons, they get a ton of that horrible sort of trolling and harassment as well. There are times I believe I was attacked and harassed because of Hannity's show, but I know he gets it from people as well. And we've got to find ways to bring that temperature down overall. Unfortunately, I don't see many people on the right trying to bring that temperature down. That's where my head goes to when you bring up some of the consequences. It's not that I worry in any given minute or hour about the safety, but it is in the back of your head, I think, when you're a television anchor or you're a high-profile journalist or an activist doing this work, you are aware that there some of this does actually have real-world consequences. When I left CNN in August. In September, I was at the county fair with my daughter, and I got an email from a fact checker, and it said, Brian, there's a story about you that says you were arrested. And the headline on this fake news website was, Brian Stelter arrested. And it said that I had committed crimes against children and that I had been arrested by a military tribunal, which was an interesting twist. And I with Ferris wheels going round and round, and I'm thinking, so should I respond to the fact checker? Should I say, how do I prove I'm not arrested, right? Do I take a picture on the Ferris wheel? This is me. Do I hold up a newspaper with the day of the week? How do I disprove this nuttiness, right? And so thankfully, some Pentagon spokesperson, because it was a military tribunal claim, actually a Pentagon spokesperson denied it, which was quite kind of them. I sent them an email saying thanks. 2 weeks later, the same site claimed I had been sentenced. I had been found guilty of pedophilia and sentenced. And then 2 weeks after that, the website claimed I had been executed at Guantanamo Bay. And the fact checker emailed me again. And the fact checker said, is there any way for you to confirm that you're alive? And I was stupefied. I was absolutely stumped. I did not know how to handle this. I called my favorite PR executive. We decided it would be too weird if I commented on my pulse or my aliveness. I don't know. But and I say this as a joke because I think it's crazy, right? I think it's ridiculous. I think it's funny. But then I had a tweet from somebody who said, my brother is convinced you were executed at Gitmo. Can you take a picture of yourself holding a sock up in your hand? Like I'm a puppeteer. And I was like, no, I don't think so. But if only one person is tricked by these crazy sites, that makes me really sad. And more importantly, it makes me think about why those sites exist, which is what you do. Because it makes me think about why was there a marketplace to put up nutty stories about my execution? And that gets, again, not to the supply, but to the demand problem. that the sickness in the country, and it doesn't just exist on one side, although I think there's a lot of really sick stuff going on in the pro-MAGA media, there's a sickness in this country that some folks want to believe that stuff. And I can laugh about it because, I was on the Ferris wheel with my daughter. But I worry about the folks who don't have the power or resources or, the thick skin to put up with it. Because real disinformation threats, people that, on TV can handle it. But I worry about high schoolers that are victims of disinformation. Yeah. I worry about TikTok accounts that are spreading lies about people and how that affects them in the hallways. I worry about businesses and startups and nonprofits that are affected by disinformation and lies on the internet and how that affects their futures and careers and business models. That is where I think the real danger lies. And so I try to laugh about my own situation, but I try to take the rest seriously.
Thank you, Brian. To Brian's point, lowering the temperature, Nandini, how do we do that? I know what you're doing in your organization, but the algorithms are built on hatred, right? I mean, hatred and anger spins faster and sells more than peace and love and kindness. So how do you get at the root of this business model that rewards that and keeps people in these echo chambers and bubbles?
Sure, that's a great question. And Brian, I agree with everything that you've said. And yes, there is a sickness in this country, but that sickness has never been a mystery to me because I live in the nooks and crannies of the ad tech supply chain. A few months ago, we received from a source who runs ads for major advertisers a site list. It was an ad placement report of we call this the $1 million Google site list, and that was what it was. So he had spent $1 million on Google ads for his client. Without, and that was like a normal budget. It was like he went through it in a couple days or in a week or so, and did not place any of the usual brand safety filters and exclusions that he was supposed to because just kind of forgot. So basically it was an opportunity for us to see where Google places ads on its own when you don't tell it what to do, like the default settings. And it was fascinating. It was 400,000 domains long, 400,000. The number one placement was on yahoo.com, which is inexplicable unless you know about bots. Yahoo has a bot issue. Number 5 was foxnews.com. Then there's a bunch of content farms, and then there was Breitbart at number 18. There was Zero Hedge at number 50 something. There was MapQuest at number 60 something. There was a whole bunch of more content farms and plagiarized content, just bullshit websites, and you get to 1,000 something, and then you finally see NewYorkTimes.com. You get to 10,000 something, and you see Boston Globe, and it's incredible to see a website like ZenHerald.com in the top 20 of a site list.
What is that?
It's a content farm.
Oh.
It's nothing. It's just nothing. It is a website that it's called a made for advertising website. It's a website that exists solely to mop up ad dollars from advertisers who are let's just it's just the content is probably sports or gossip or TV or whatever. They just lift the content from somewhere else, and that's how they make money. So that site list is a reflection of America today, and it provides the answer. That's the answer.
But you're saying the answer is take back the internet from the robots that are ruining it, right?
No.
That's not human behavior. That's all algorithmic, right? Buying ads on crazy sites and...
Oh, no. It's not just algorithmic. It's also, what's happening here is that these are this is happening because advertisers allow it. And when I say advertisers allow it, I don't want to necessarily place the blame on advertisers, because most advertisers, just like with Facebook advertisers, are small businesses. So the majority of Google's ad revenue business comes from small businesses who don't know what they're doing. And they rely on Google's default settings. So you have like these sort of maybe like 20% or so of these really big companies that do try and do have the resources, but even, you know, even they fail. So what chance does a small business have against this? And so this is what we refer to as the disinformation tax. It is a tax placed upon every small business, every Google, not just Google ads, but anyone who's doing any kind of digital advertising, where a percentage of your ad spend goes towards content that you would not otherwise support, content that directly undermines our democracy. And this is the crux of the problem. If advertisers were able to control where their ads were going, if they were able to check where their ads were going, they would we would be able to turn this thing around.
Thank you. This is a question for both of you, Brian and Nandini. Making news and controversy as we speak, Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, immediately fired CEO, CFO, legal affairs and policy chief, and he tweeted, "The bird is freed." He claims he wants to prevent the platform becoming an echo chamber for hate and division. Do you believe him? And should we be concerned? Who wants to take that first?
I mean, I think Elon Musk is winning the attention war. That's clearly what he wants. He wants attention, and he's the center of attention through this. I am addicted to Twitter enough that I want to hope that it won't change in negative ways. I mean, I met my wife on Twitter. I love Twitter. I want to preserve Twitter. But I also know that it's, some of what's ailing Twitter is the sickness that we're talking about more broadly. Like, there was an era on Twitter where, I would tweet where I was going to meet up with my friends. And I think it was like 2010, I tweeted, there was a bar in Lower East Side, I tweeted, "I'm at Epstein's." And 10 years later, that tweet was taken by conspiracy theorists to mean I was at Jeffrey Epstein's. Oh. And I'm thinking, again, it goes back to the fact-checking thing. It's like, so do I show them a picture of the bar? Like, it was a really cool bar back in 2010. But there's no getting through to people that want to believe you were over at Jeffrey Epstein's. But that, to me, is the evolution of Twitter, like in one tweet. One innocent post that gets distorted by crazies, in that way. And, with all that in mind, I still am on Twitter. I use it differently. But I'm intrigued by what Musk is going to do, and I do wonder if there's a scenario. I'll try to be the optimist, okay? There could be a scenario where he says, okay, there's two versions of Twitter. There is the moderated version of Twitter that has been implemented to some degree in recent years. Of course, there's still a lot of nonsense on that moderated version of Twitter, but they have taken steps to try to clean up some of the pollution on Twitter. Maybe you're going to have access to the moderated version, or you're going to have access to the completely free-for-all Wild West version. And people can choose back and forth which one. And I do wonder, Ben, being an optimist, probably totally naive, maybe that's what we need on the internet. We need a version where when you're inside the walls, you know that the New York Times website is what it appears to be, and not a AI-driven, robot-ridden version that's trying to trick you. And when you're outside the walls, anything goes, and Brian Stelter was executed, and it's all that out there. And to the extent if we could actually tell the difference between those two versions of the internet, I think we'd all be a lot better off. I have no idea how to implement that, but if Elon Musk can figure out a version of that on Twitter, I would be all for it. And now for the counter argument.
She's shaking her head.
You cannot implement this, Brian. This makes absolutely no business sense. If Elon Musk were to invent a free-for-all Twitter and a not free-for-all Twitter, we would like, it's all still the same company. We would still go after as advertisers. again, I'm sorry, like I'm a broken record. It's all about advertisers. The entire internet is about advertisers, and Twitter is like has spent a lot of time and effort, and like folks at the company have invested in brand safety, and they have brand safety tools. They have promises that they've made to advertisers, and there's a lot of work that has gone into this because this is the core of their business. They need advertisers. Group M, which is one of the biggest ad agencies in the world, I think said yesterday that something like a dozen of their clients told them if Elon reinstates Trump to immediately pull ads from Twitter. So that is just the tip of the iceberg. These conversations are happening all over the industry, and so I do believe that this news obviously reached Elon, and that was the motivation behind that open letter to advertisers. I'm not sure if he was
right. He wrote a letter saying, "I love you, advertisers," yesterday.
Yeah. He said it's not going to become a free for all. I want it to be a place for free speech, but like it's not going to be that bad. And it's like I don't know what you're thinking, Elon, because this has been done before. There's been Parler, there's been Getter, there's like Truth Social. They all end up having to ban users or enforce some kind of content moderation, because if they don't, they will get kicked out of the App Store. I mean, there are checks and balances here that give us more leverage than you might realize.
But if Twitter becomes a cesspool and it is a free-for-all, right, advertisers will move, users will move, right? The party will go somewhere else, right? And I worry that then we become even more of a country and a society where there's a right-wing internet and a left-wing internet, and Twitter will be, Elon Musk is clearly trying to appeal in some form to the right-wing internet, and we end up with even fewer spaces where the two meet and cross over. And,
I mean,
that's out of our wheelhouse, but I wonder about that outcome or that effect.
I don't like to think about the internet in terms of right-wing and left-wing. I think that's not like a helpful framing in my opinion, because we have, again, like we use very specific language. Even at Check My Ads, we say, advertisers should not be, like it's our value position that they shouldn't be advertising on obviously not violence and so on, but hate, harassment, bigotry. We even try to helpfully frame it as like, what is the real world outcome of the content that you are supporting? And advertisers, and when we consulted with advertisers, this was a much more helpful framing for them, because, and I want to just kind of point out, there's a universe of products and tools and frameworks that advertisers currently rely on. There's, for example, there's something called Ad Fontes Media. It's some kind of a bias chart with the reliability, what is it, like right versus left, and then like reliability is the y-axis, and it's a nonsense, like look it up on your phone, you can Google it. It's like this nonsense chart of like right, left, there's like Washington Post up here, and then like a little bit to the right, like left is maybe to the right is CNN, and then there's like InfoWars down here, and I'm like, what is the point of this freaking chart? Like what are you supposed to take away from it? They do sell it to advertisers, and advertisers are looking at it and they're like, okay, so how are we going to do how are we going to stay balanced and objective and do both sides and respect both sides? When just the truth of the matter is, like, a lot of this content on, unfortunately, the right side is just toxic in terms of the exact definition of like hate and harmful content, and in terms of real world violence. So we have to move away from right versus left. I don't even think that exists anymore. I don't know what that means, and move towards a set of values that we can define and agree on, because what we're dealing with is real world outcomes. What you've shared with us so far, your stories are about real world outcomes, and we need to optimize for the kind of world that we want to, or country that we want to live in, and that is something that every advertiser needs to be doing, and that's what all of us need to be working towards defining as journalists.
But you're viewed by that far right as a pressure campaign to censor and stop and shut them down, right? Which is basically what we are.
Whew. That's
But you're part, in other words, you're part of the elite cabal. You are part of the threat. You're part of what's hurting real America. That is an interesting, this is what we're up against, right? Like this is the dynamic that we're up against in this country, that there is a minority that feels loss of power and status, that feels that only outlets like Fox speak to their truth, right?
yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, that's what they've been led to believe, but that's, I mean, yes, the spectrum, whatever it is, has moved in this direction, but go to P&G's mission statement,
Right.
or go to any any major advertiser's mission statement, or their careers page where they say we care about diversity and inclusion, where they have created and developed just like millions and millions of dollars worth of brand equity to maintain a certain image and
Openness, yes. No, and they're moving where the country's moving. Big companies are moving where the country's moving.
No,
Open
they're-
and multicultural, no?
Oh, in that sense, okay. I don't know which direction we're talking about. Yeah, no, but they do have a set of values, and unfortunately, a lot of people are unhinged from reality in this country. But does that mean we go chase them, even though we know that it's not only wrong, but it's counter to our corporate brand values and everything that we work towards?
Well, this is a struggle for newsrooms too. Is it Trump's big lie? Is it appropriate to call it a big lie? How should we characterize his behavior, trying to overturn the election, try to dismantle democracy?
Well, I would by telling the truth.
You do it by telling the truth, but whose truth? I like your point about that ridiculous chart that tries to claim that Washington Post and InfoWars are on some spectrum where they're the same thing and just doing it from different sides. I would like to do a version of that chart. Maybe we should do it together. That's like news gathering and not. Because that's the difference. There are brands that gather news, and then there are brands that don't. And those brands that don't gather news, they still do interesting things sometimes. They talk about the news. They may create cartoons and memes about the news, or they might lie about it. But news gathering is the part that we want to support and fund and try to lift up in this country and in this world. And by figuring out, how the ad money flows, hopefully more toward the news gathering and less to everybody else that's regurgitating it, right? I mean, fundamentally, that's what you're trying to do. Direct it toward the people that are actually gathering information. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think
that's like, I wonder about that spectrum. Like, also for the focus on advertising, the way to support news gathering is also subscriptions, membership, donations, other revenue sources. I just want to add that to the mix of the conversation that all of us vote with our own dollars, and it's not just through eyeballs and clicks, it's also through what we choose to support. When I moved to New Jersey and immediately paid for my local paper, it costs too much, but I know that I need to do it. And if I don't, who else is going to, right? So we can all put our own money where our mouths are, at least a little bit. We can all make a little bit of a difference that way to support the news gatherers versus everything that's not news gathering.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. I just want to put this in perspective. In 2017, at the height of its influence, Breitbart was set to make $8 million in revenue that year, and our campaign within 3 months lost them 90% of that. And thank you. And this is the kind of economics we're talking about. Back to that $1 million Google site list, the fact that Google is still Breitbart is still number 18, and the real news and legacy news is on the bottom of the spectrum, and that is there is. This is why I do what I do. We want to bring attention to the fact that the card, what is it? The card is decked. The stacked against the
stack is decked. Yes, there we go.
The deck is stacked against the news.
It is stacked against the news industry. It is. Particularly in digital advertising revenues. Also, like the Gateway Pundit during the 2020 election cycle is estimated to have made around $1 million. In just a couple of months, and they were booted off of Google Ads
after a while. But this is the kind of economics we're talking about. This is what could save newsrooms if advertisers knew about it, and if publishers were were fighting for their survival, and also and covering the story, because this is the biggest uncovered story in not just America, but the world. I just want to point out that these ad exchanges, I mean, Google is the biggest ad exchange in the world, and it is not a coincidence that there's a disinformation crisis everywhere, because all of these pipelines in India, in Brazil, everywhere in the world come back to Google ads. Google ads and the rest of the ad exchanges. And I want to say one more very important detail in the story is that all of this goes against their own supply policies. So there is specific language in the supply policies of Google and of lesser known ad exchanges where they say we will not monetize content that is harmful, that is that denies the election, that is like now it's like promotes the war in Russia and so on, and they choose not to enforce it, but they know right from wrong. They know right from wrong, they just choose not to enforce it. So we do have tools at our disposal to change the way make a real massive change in the way, in where money is distributed around the world and to what media.
Thank you, Nandini. I love the passion of both of you, but I've promised audience Q&A. We're going to go a little bit past our 6:30. You will have time to stretch your legs and things before the 7 p.m. If you have a question, the microphones are open. Come on up and ask Nandini and Brian a question. You want to go first? I think
it is. Mr. Grundle mentioned how hatred and anger sells in this country. Well, it sells across the world. And Ms. Jammi, you say you don't place the blame on the advertisers, but all of us have cell phones here, and everybody downloads some sort of apps. And those apps, gamers, games, little games, whatever, they all tend to have advertisements. And a lot of those advertisements are very negative. Have you looked at those advertisements? Because they are angry. A lot of them are showing bigotry. They're showing violence against women, against children. Are you even encountering and looking to deal with the people? Because those are advertisers that are affecting the youth, and those youth are eventually going to be our voters.
Thank you for that question. Do you want to?
Thank you so much for that question. That's a really, really thoughtful question. Well, first of all of those ads are against the ad exchange's ad policy. I'm 100% sure. I don't know who served them, but they're against the policy, and this is the fight that we're up against. They're not enforcing these policies. We at this time are focusing on publishers. Specifically, we focus earlier this year we launched the Defund the Insurrectionist campaign to cut off 6 of the biggest voices behind the insurrection from the advertising supply chain. These individuals include Steve Bannon, Dan Bongino, Charlie Kirk, Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson, and I always forget one, but there is one other. For us, campaigns like this allow us to bring awareness to ad exchanges as a whole, because people the public doesn't quite understand how any of this works. So what we're trying to do at this time is to create awareness of the advertising ecosystem, that this exists, that these ads are being placed automatically and creating sort of, what is it, a dark money ATM for bad actors, and what you pointed out is really important, and it's something that we would love to address in the future.
Thank you. Sir, go ahead.
When I submit a letter to our local newspaper, the Times Union, and if the editor smiles kindly on my thoughts, I will get a phone message, a phone call from staff. They will vet me. They will make sure I am me. They will make sure that I've not submitted this anywhere else. They have a sense of responsibility. More importantly, they will not print anonymous letters. It seems to me that the deadly combination that our two panelists face all the time is a combination of anonymity and the fact that the platforms such as Twitter or Facebook are not responsible for their content. When I post on the New York Times their comments, I'm appalled that 95% of the people who comment are able to use anonymity. I'm one of the few people who use my full name and where I live. I'm not ashamed of what I think or believe. I think that the trying to do away with anonymity on the internet is impossible. However, responsibility of the platforms. I know that they have immunity right now from responsibility for what people post. I know there's been a lot of debate about that immunity. I'd love to hear what you two think about that.
Me first?
I've always avoided taking a position on Section 230 when I was at CNN, so I'd rather you go. Let me think. Let me see if you can persuade me.
I mean, Sleeping Giants was an anonymous Twitter account for years, so I guess I'm biased towards anonymity, preserving anonymity. I think it is important that we have that. I'll tell you where anonymity is not okay. It's not okay if you are running a website that makes money from advertisers and no one can figure out who owns or who is behind the website. And that is something that I want to point out is the reality today with Google Ads. 9 out of 10 sellers in Google's publisher inventory, which is millions and millions and millions of websites long, are hidden from the public. That is where I would draw the line. If they are hooked up to the Google Ads or any ads ATM, they should tell us, we should be able to figure out and audit who they are, and there's a responsibility for Google to tell us. But I think if it's, I'm biased. As an activist, it was really helpful to be anonymous for a while, and I think that's a much more there's a much more complicated, longer discussion to be had. But
thank you. Do you want to jump in?
I just wish there was a toggle so I could turn off all the anonymous accounts and then turn them back on and have more control. And I always come back to that issue of control over your internet experience, because right now I think the tech giants control us. We should be able to use technology, not be used by technology. And in that regard, pressure does work, at least around the edges and around the margins in some ways. I go back to my humorous and also ridiculous story about my execution. If you Google that story, you'll see the truth before the lie. You'll see the fact check before the crazy. And 7 years ago, it didn't work that way. Google had not prioritized fact-checking sites over fake news sites. So I look at that, I see a little glimmer of progress, a little tiny glimmer of hope. But we need so much more of that, and that involves pressure to the technology giants so that we're not being used by these.
So this is going to have to be the lightning round. I'm sorry, we've got people lining up, and we're only going to have another 5-10 minutes, so we can give you a break. But you can ask a quick question, and we'll try to do quick answers.
I think it was my turn. No?
I think Willie was up. Yeah.
Information and words definition have a woke rate, and they change. And I'm wondering if you could compare and contrast disinformation and misinformation.
Well, to me, misinformation, I give you directions and I take you down the wrong street, but it wasn't on purpose. And to me, disinformation is when I purposely lead you down that dark path because I want to hurt you. To me, that is the difference. To me, there's a lot more misinformation than disinformation, but both exist. And some of it, a lot of it's profiteering, some of it's also corporate and state-sponsored propaganda. To me, what's interesting is all that gray area. I'm interested in misinformation because, again, it's not always intentional. It's not intentional. I'm interested in all those deceptions and distractions that happen because if I tell you a true fact, but it's the least important fact of the story, then that's a very deceptive thing to do. And that's a lot of what I see happening in media. Less actual, it's not that pro-Trump outlets publish lies all the time. Sometimes there are, but a lot of it is just about making you look over there, not over here. And I think it's important to be aware of those techniques and tactics and see them for what they are.
Do you want to jump in quickly?
Yeah, I agree. That is the technical definition of disinformation and misinformation. I would just add that disinformation breeds misinformation. So there's some people who are doing bad things to disinform us, and then when it comes down to trickles down to your community, they really believe what they're saying.
Right. Friends don't let friends share fake news. Right. Let's make that a slogan.
Yes.
Come on. Should be that easy. It's so hard.
Go ahead.
Hi, Ms. Jammi. Just curious, you're doing amazing work. How are you getting funded? Are you a 501c3?
Yeah, we're a 501c3. Thank you so much for that question. We're 501c3. We just had our first birthday yesterday. We turned 1 year
Happy
old.
birthday.
Thank you. And we're funded by major foundations and family foundations, as well as our checkmates. We have a checkmates program for people who donate to us monthly.
Thank you. Yes, right in this side.
So what effect do you think AI will have on first news generating? Because they do within 5 minutes of a story, and then on the newsroom that continually cuts down salaries and positions until there's only one or few people overseeing AI doing all the thinking for us. And like you said, is the tech giants thinking for us, but as they rely more on AI, is the AI.
It's what keeps me up at night. I mean, it really. So I had an article I came across on the internet a couple years ago, and the first paragraph of the article were all quotes I actually said on CNN. The rest of the article were all made-up quotes that I believe were algorithmic, because who would bother writing fake quotes? And I'm thinking to myself, if I can't even tell what's true about what I said, and how's my mom going to tell? And how are you going to tell? And to me, that's just like a tiny little sliver of where we're heading. Right? We're heading into a place that's going to be much worse than that, and it's going to hurt a lot more people that are not high public figures. So I think and I hope the antidote is the solution. Farm-to-table food, let's have farm-to-table journalism, like slow news, slow food. We're going to have to kind of go back to the earth, right? And I know this sounds like I'm fantasizing, right? But there's an element of truth to that in an environment where computers can make up crazy stuff in a way that we cannot process, we're just going to have to go back to the Times Union. We're going to have to go back to the New York Times. We're going to have to go to their actual websites and not Twitter feeds that confuse us. We're going to have to pay for the news that we know is trustworthy and support it with our own dollars, and that's a version of farming in the backyard. And I really think that is the only thing I can think of to combat the environment that we are all heading into, which is deep fake everything, fake video, fake articles, everything potentially made up, except hopefully with newsrooms on our side to help us determine what's genuine. And I'm probably just dreaming for that.
Thank you. Right here. We'll take these last few quickly.
Yeah.
All right. Hello. You've said before that one of the advantages of the current online marketplace as it's being developed is that it's tending to group all the legitimate sites above everything else. But what that often seems to do is prioritize simply one or two large national news sites when you look up news, whereas 30 years ago when you wanted to look at the news, you would see more local information. what responsibility do you national sites have in like preserving the ability of local journalists to report on their communities?
That is an incredible question. Yes, you're correct. The national news sites, although they're lower on the list, they are still making money. Whereas it is almost impossible for any one of us to start a website, to start a newsroom today, and to start reporting. I mean, if you wanted to do that, it would be near impossible because of.
Oh, it makes me want to prove you wrong.
Yeah, I mean, no, but really with with the way that Google Ads works and what is prioritized, there's no way in. And what needs to be done, and this is the education that this is what we sort of preach at Check My Ads when we speak to advertisers, is that we hope that they're inspired by looking at their own ad placement reports and seeing how much junk that they're funding, and take that money and invest it towards media that benefits our communities, and that means making direct ad placements rather than programmatic ad placements. We hope that that advertisers start to move towards that as they check their ads.
So we only have about 3 minutes left. You can each ask in 25 words or less if possible. Ask your questions one after another, and then we'll let them answer. We want to give you time to stretch your legs, use the bathrooms before the 7 p.m. starts. So just ask your question very quickly, and then they will take all three at once. Go ahead.
Mr. Stelter, earlier when you guys were talking about Elon Musk purchasing Twitter, you said something about how you would be in support of like a moderated Twitter and like a free-for-all kind of Twitter, and I understand like the logic behind that, but I don't quite understand how that would encourage the lowering of misinformation and disinformation.
No, it wouldn't.
Because that would still there would still be so many people who would be on like the free-for-all Twitter who would still be purporting like lies and misinformation and disinformation and whatnot. So.
I agree. You're right. You're right.
Well, you won that round.
They wouldn't have fun either.
I'm not sure I won it. I think it might happen, but yeah.
Right here.
This is for both of you. How do you think the spread of misinformation has led to a distrust of the media by the public?
And do you want to do the last one?
Yeah, and one more question. Yeah, they'll hold on to that, and then one last question. Okay.
Very quickly, Brian, I missed your 11 a.m. Analysis.
Thank you. I miss
very
you too.
much.
Thank you.
The question is, how would you get students in high school and university to respect reliable sources and to learn how to seek them out and sort through the very complicated world that you guys have just both
Let's take a drink when
portrayed?
everyone says that term. Well, I'll go first if you want. This is going to sound naive, and Jonathan and Devlin will probably disagree with me in the next panel. I think most people just want to know what is true in the world. They are overwhelmed. They are exhausted. They are saturated by too much information, some of which is news, but a lot of which is noise. I believe that most people don't want to be hoaxed. They don't want to be deceived. They want to be nourished. And we just, right now a lot of our information system's broken, our tech system's broken. It makes it hard to be nourished in that way. But most people, even a lot of the folks that publicly claim they believe the big lie, if you actually get them drunk, they'll tell you they know it's all BS. So most people want to know what's true, and that gives me hope. And that makes me think that, yes, newsrooms are distrusted, and it's a huge challenge, but we can win people back inch by inch, day by day. And when it comes to educating the next generation, they're going to help us do it. They're going to build new tools, new techniques. They're going to develop new campaigns and platforms that hopefully will help us create a cleaner information world. That's my optimism.
That's great to hear. Do you want to have the last word, Nandini?
Yeah, I'll just add that what happened this morning to Mr. Pelosi, to Nancy Pelosi's husband, is an assassination attempt. And I'm waiting for newspapers and media to call it what it is. And it's sad to see that we don't call things out for what they are in media. And I hope that is something that we can change, and that's the truth that people want to see, and I hope that journalists take them up on that.
Telling the truth. You came back to our title.
Yes. Whoa. So we're off to a great start.